5 things to know about the MacBook Air M2, both good and bad, before you make a purchase. Watch this video till the end to know all that's necessary to make a smart decision about Apple's new MacBook Air for 2022 and beyond. The world's best-selling laptop has finally been given the Apple Silicon makeover it deserves. It ditches the wedge-shaped design of its forebears in favor of a super slim, uniformly flat design that is 20% slimmer by volume than its predecessors, yet is still powerful enough to snap at the heels of its closest Apple sibling, the new M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch. Physically, the laptop has shrunk in all dimensions, and weighing 1.24 kilos, the new MacBook Air is slimmer and lighter than its M1 powered predecessor. Yet comes with a bigger 13.6-inch liquid retina display, an upgraded 1080p FaceTime camera up from 720p, and Apple's next-gen silicon, the M2 system on a chip, which promises up to 1.4 times more performance than the M1 version and up to 15 times faster performance than its Intel Core i5 powered ancestors. That's some upgrade. Pricing for the new MacBook Air starts at 120,000 rupees for the entry-level model, equipped with an 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU M2 with 16-core neural engine, 8 GB of unified memory, and 256 GB of solid-state storage. And there's a step-up 150,000 rupees version with an 8-core CPU, 10-core GPU, and also with 8 GB of unified memory and a 512 GB SSD. As always, there's also a number of build-to-order options with prices dependent on configuration. These include 16 GB from 20,000 rupees or 24 GB from 40,000 rupees of unified memory, plus 512 GB, 1 TB or 2 TB of storage from 20,000, 40,000 or 80,000 rupees respectively. The entry-level model can also be configured to include an M2 with a 10-core GPU for an extra 10,000 rupees, which I think is worth it. Although I chose the 8GB 512 GB configuration myself, I've also been testing a model that comes with an 8-core CPU, 10-core GPU, 16 GB of unified memory and a 1 TB SSD, all of which cost you 199,000 rupees. The only other upgrade option is for the power adapter. While the base model MacBook Air comes with a 30-watt single-port USB-C adapter as standard, you can upgrade that to either a 35-watt dual USB-C adapter or a 67-watt single-port USB-C adapter for 2,000 rupees a piece. Or you can simply buy the 150,000 rupees step-up model and get either the 35-watt dual USB-C adapter or the 67-watt USB-C adapter included. The choice is yours. Talking of choice, while rumors had circulated that the new MacBook Air would come in similarly striking colors to the 24-inch M1 iMac, orange, pink, etc., what we have is something much more sensible and sober: silver, starlight, space grey, and midnight. The midnight color is actually a very deep shade of blue, but as others have noticed, it's also a magnet for fingerprints, which are far more noticeable on this finish. The much more sensible starlight color for me then. Flip the lid on the MacBook Air and you'll notice, like previous models, it doesn't have the touch bar, as is still included on the M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch, and instead features a full height function key row with a large escape key on the left and combined power Touch ID button on the right. Plus, there's a versatile force touch trackpad sitting on the wrist rest at the bottom of the keyboard deck. One thing the MacBook Air does share with the MacBook Pro 13-inch is a scarcity of ports. The only port on the right-hand side is for the 3.5mm headphone jack, whilst on the left you get just 2 Thunderbolt or USB 4 ports. That's somewhat offset though by the presence of a MagSafe 3 port on the same side, meaning you don't lose a port to charging duties, and if you plump for the 35-watt power adapter, you also gain a USB-C port there too. Pleasingly, the included MagSafe cable is braided and color-coded, and because it has USB-C at the other end, you could always connect that to a hub to charge your Mac if you don't have the power adapter to hand. The other big new feature is of course that liquid retina display. While the pixel count is largely the same as before, 2560 by 1664 versus 2560 by 1600, you do get increased brightness, 500 nits versus 400 nits, plus P3 wide color support and True Tone. More controversial is the notch. Thanks to its narrower bezels, the 1080p FaceTime camera housing appears prominently at the top of the display, partially covering the menu bar. Whether that's a big deal for you depends on how much stuff you tend to keep in the menu bar and whether the apps you use can accommodate its presence. Of course, it's not enough to just redesign the world's best-selling laptop, you have to make it perform. And here the MacBook Air hits a home run, albeit with a couple of caveats. While in the 8-core, 10-core GPU guys, it can theoretically go toe-to-toe with the MacBook Pro 13-inch, it lacks the latter's fan-based cooling, and that means it can wilt during heavier workloads, throttling its processor power to help the laptop keep its cool. In day-to-day use, you're never likely to notice, but I noticed quite a bit of variation in my benchmarks, although the average scores are still very impressive for a laptop such as this. As long as you're realistic about the MacBook Air's limits and Apple's ambitions for it, you won't go too wrong. If you do need powerhouse specs and a portable Mac, then get the MacBook Pro 14-inch or 16-inch instead. In the Geekbench 5 single-core test, it achieved an average score of 1895 compared to 1903 for the M2-powered MacBook Pro 13-inch and 1705 for the M1 MacBook Air. In Handbrake, the MacBook Air averaged a relatively quick 30 minutes and 35 seconds compared to 44 minutes and 30 seconds for the M1 MacBook Air and 23 minutes and 12 seconds for the M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch. And in DaVinci Resolve, the M2 MacBook Air rendered my effects-laden video in 23 minutes 35 seconds compared to 19 minutes and 38 seconds for the MacBook Pro 13-inch and 29 minutes and 16 seconds for the M1 MacBook Air. In all of my tests, the MacBook Pro 13-inch proved to be more consistent in its performance than the MacBook Air, something borne out by my Rise of the Tomb Raider benchmark, where the M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch repeatedly hit 30 frames per second, even though the game is not optimized for Apple Silicon. Whereas the M2 MacBook Air peaked at 30 FPS, dropped to 25 FPS fairly often, and reached as low as 17 FPS on occasion, which suggests some throttling. I've also seen reports that just as with the entry-level MacBook Pro 13-inch, Apple is again using slower NAND 256GB SSDs in the entry-level MacBook Air, making it slower than the 2x NAND 128GB SSDs used in parallel in the M1 version. The 1TB SSD on my step-up model though performed admirably, averaging over 2900 MB per second write and over 2700 read in the Blackmagic disk speed test. The M2 MacBook Pro 13-inch averaged 3051 MB per second write and 2806 MB per second read, using the same metric, making it marginally faster. The M2 powered MacBook Air is very accomplished and is considerably improved over its M1 sibling, let alone the VZ Intel era MacBook Air models that came before. In day-to-day use, the MacBook Air is quick to boot, fast to fire up apps, and will handle most tasks you throw at it, whilst its keyboard is fast and fluid to type on with decent key travel, unlike on the cramp-inducing butterfly switches of old. The Liquid Retina display is gorgeous, and the 4 speakers built into the gap between the top of the keyboard and the display don't sound half bad either. Not as good as those on a MacBook Pro, but enough for occasional listening. And as for battery life, the M2 MacBook Air can last for up to 18 hours between recharges when watching Apple TV or 15 hours of wireless web. The only fly in the ointment is the thermal limits of this fanless chassis, and in my experience the M2 Air heats up more than the M1 Air. If you can work with that, this is definitely a thing of beauty and a laptop that should feature at the top of your shopping list. Thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing if you found this content useful. I will see you in the next one.